Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Lean Publishing Tip of the Day, where today I'm going to be talking a little bit about whether or not, as a self-published editor author, you should be hiring an editor or think about hiring an editor to work with. As usual, the sort of normal housekeeping is we're going to do just a little couple of minutes of updates and stuff like that. But it's at the 2-minute mark in the video that we're going to start talking about the actual subject of the tip of the day. And the reason we do this is so that if you're watching the recording, which is going to be most people, you could just skip ahead to 2 minutes. Um, as always, there is an accompanying blog post for every Lean Publishing tip of the day that you can find on our blog at leanpub.com/blog. Obviously, it's useful if you don't want to listen to me talk or watch me talk about something and you'd rather read about it. There's always helpful links and stuff like that in the tips of the day as well. If you don't see it on the blog, when you go to leanpub.com/blog, just click the magnifying glass and search for the keywords that you're seeing here in the screen share. If you're interested in watching these Lean Publishing tips of the day every day, we try and do them at noon Pacific time every weekday. With sometimes we miss some, but that's what we're kind of aiming for. And there's also a LinkedIn newsletter if you're a LinkedIn user. That you can get there, so you'll get these updates every day when we publish them. We highly recommend and ask that you subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're into YouTube and stuff like that. Every follower we get or every subscriber that we get helps our authors get discovered. So you're not only helping yourself, hopefully, but also helping us. And of course, on our YouTube channel, you'll find lots more than just these Lean Publishing tip of the day videos. You'll also find book launch videos, podcast videos, explainer videos, new release videos, all kinds of other things like that. So definitely subscribe wherever you find us. And yeah, these Lean Publishing tips of the day are meant to be a record that can be used anytime going forwards for people. So we're approaching the 2-minute mark. So let me do the countdown. 2, 1. Okay, everyone, welcome to today's Lean Publishing tip of the day, where we're going to be talking about whether or not you should think about paying an editor to read your book manuscript and work with you to improve it. So if you're into the if you're getting new to the book publishing world or anything like that, you probably actually have heard of
editors.
although it might be a little bit of a mystery what they actually do and what they can do to help you. So in there in a sense it might be no typical way of doing working with an editor. In the past, typically you would have only worked with an editor if you had a contract with a publishing company that was going to be publishing you. And they would assign an editor to you, basically. That's just, now I'm not sure how much that actually happens anymore. The book publishing world is changing rapidly. Um, and typically, from what I hear, book publishers are spending less money on authors and helping authors market their books, produce their books, write their books, etc. Which is one of the reasons that self-publishing has become much more popular. I mean, a typical self-published author might approach a publisher, get a contract, and then go, the only real difference between this and doing it myself is that I get an advance. But the price you pay for that advance is a much lower royalty rate than you would get if you typically get if you self-publish the book. Um, uh, but that aside, whether or not you should get an editor to read your book manuscript, let's first talk about the sort of two main different types of kind of editor that you can get. The first is a copy editor. This is someone who will check, obviously, your spelling and grammar and stuff like that, but they actually typically do a lot more than that. They look for consistency and continuity and stuff like that. For example, they'll find, like, I mean, if you're writing a fiction book, what if you start referring to a character by a different name later on? And they might offer kind of stylistic kind of observations as well. If you kind of like left something hanging, you said, I'm going to do this later on in chapter 5, and you don't do it in chapter 5, a copy editor will probably be looking for things like that. If you say something in chapter 6 and you're like, oh, I dealt with this in chapter 1, a copy editor will probably go, oh, no, you dealt with that in chapter 2, or you didn't deal with that in chapter 1 at all. So a copy editor can help you kind of firm up your book, fix mistake. Basically, one way of looking at it is they're there to find mistakes. Is basically what they're typically doing. But there's also the concept of a development editor. You might hear this referred to a number of different ways. But a development editor is basically someone who works with you from the conception stage, right? They'll ask you, like, why are you writing this book? What kind of book do you want to write? Um, who's your audience? And then you might think, I never even thought about who my audience might be. What's an audience? How do I segment that? How do I understand what an audience is? So a good development editor will be able to tell you, well, there's audiences for this kind of genre. There's audiences for that kind of genre. The audience for this genre has this characteristic. The audience for that genre has that characteristic. The audience for this genre is typically looking for this. The audience for that genre is looking for that. So they can help you with that kind of stuff. They can help you with obviously with your title. They can help that development editor will help you with your structure, what to write about, where to write about it in the structure of your book, all kinds of things like that. So you can think of a development editor as basically like a kind of partner in a way in the production of your book, and it's hopefully someone who's done this with many other books and many other authors and knows what they're doing. And so one of the things that a sort of proper editor brings to you is knowledge of books and how books are written, how books are published, what a good book looks like, things like that. The development editor probably won't be doing the copy editing, so you'll probably have to hire someone separately to do copy editing if you're doing that. Um, so so that's kind of the roles that the editors might play. And so what I write here in our blog post for today is the boring answer about whether you should hire an editor or editors to help you is it's up to you and it depends. And by the way, the reason I decided to do this today, this lean publishing tip of the day on this subject is that so I was talking with an author yesterday who was talking about writing and publishing their life's work. And this is something that based on 20 or 30 years of experience, they've got this kind of contribution that they want to make to their field that they hope will improve the world, but they hope will get taken up and viewed by people and either accepted or rejected. But the book is very important to them in all kinds of different ways, their career, what they've worked on, sharing their knowledge with the world, hopefully spreading it, things like that. So that's one type of book is the life's work. Another type of book is, I've always wanted to write about this. I've got something to say. I just want to get it out there. Um, and so that's another type of book. And whether or not you want to hire an editor, for the former, the life's work one, hiring an editor is probably more likely something that you're going to want to do than I've just got this great idea and I want to get it out there. Obviously, one of the complicating factors for self-publishing on Leanpub when you're deciding whether you want an editor is that Leanpub encourages you to publish often, publish early and publish often in accordance with our lean publishing philosophy. So the idea is basically, if you've ever heard of serial publishing, novels in the past, I mean, it still happens now, but were published a chapter at a time in magazines. And then it was only when the book was finished that it was published in book format. Leanpub encourages people to write their books as they go, write and publish their books as they go. So if you've written one chapter, publish it. And then anyone who buys it will get any updates that you make in the future. And then what we recommend you do is as you finish new chapters, you publish a new version of the book. That new version then has that new chapter in it until you're done. And people can buy your book along the way. This has lots of great benefits, including the fact that, you might be 3 chapters in, have no readers and realize, oh, I should be writing a different book, which is actually a great result of the lean publishing process. You might also get people going, oh, I've got to chapter 3. This all looks really good. Are you planning a chapter on this subject or that subject? And then you can actually change your plan potentially for for your future chapters are going to be in your book. You can also get, and hopefully you will get feedback from early readers about what you've written so far. They might be like, there's a typo in in chapter 3. There's a typo on page 50. There's a typo on page 1. As soon as you hit publish, just like sending an email in a way, you immediately see the mistakes. But with the lean publishing process, you're basically getting feedback from your readers live, along the way as you write your book. And so in that case, the question of whether you should get an editor, either a copy editor or a development editor is, a little bit complicated. Probably with respect to copy editing, this is just something you don't need. There's obviously like all kinds of great tools out there for spelling and grammar and stuff like that. But when it comes to the consistency and continuity and the promise you made in chapter 2 that you were going to do this in chapter 8, your readers will point these things out to you, hopefully positively. They might use the contact author form on Leanpub. They might use an email address that you've provided to them, stuff like that. So what you'll be doing is if you're doing the lean publishing thing, you'll be getting feedback along the way. Even if you publish your book as a complete finished thing, you'll get feedback from people. And with Leanpub, we make it really easy to update and change things. So you can kind of think of it as kind of crowdsourcing your copy editing at the very least. Um, and what a development editor would do, I think most development editors, if they heard about this, would be like, "Oh my god!" Like they can maybe conceive of normally the idea of like a serial publishing where you've planned all the chapters and then you write them in sequence. But the idea that you're going to be going back and editing something that you've already published might kind of they would be probably interested in that idea, but they would have to think differently about how they would approach that project. So basically, um, if you're going to be publishing your book on Leanpub, self-publishing it, and working with a development editor, I would recommend that before you sign the contract with them, you talk with them at length about what your publication plan is. Are you planning on just publishing a kind of like door stopper, and when it's 100% done, that's when you're hitting the publish button the first and only time? Then tell them that. If you plan on doing the lean publishing process, you should let them know that. And if you're planning on doing this kind of like getting feedback from people and incorporating that into your publishing and writing plans, you should ask them about that. Another thing, obviously, that matters when the question of whether or not you should hire an editor is budget. Do you have any money to spend on your publishing project, on your book publishing project? And one thing to keep in mind there is that, I think a lot of self-published authors are like, I don't want to spend any money. There's a lot of people who are actually willing to and want to spend money on their book promotion and on their book cover and on their book editor and stuff like that, and they make a budget. It could be $500. It could be, much more than that. There are people who do, if you're really planning on if you've got your life's work or you're really planning on changing your life with a book, you want to try to become, like, say, a public figure in your area of expertise, whether it's, kind of marketing or sales or, uh, I don't know, model trains or something like that. If you want to become a go-to person who's maybe even going to be appearing on TV, stuff like that, you might actually spend 10, 20, or 40 or $50,000 on your book project. And if you've got that kind of budget, if you're trying and transforming your life in that way, then 100% you should be hiring a development editor. You're kind of, and when you're doing something like that, you're kind of doing, you can think of it almost like producing a movie or something like that, right? You're going to want to hire experts if you've got the budget. If you're trying to do something like that, you're going to want to hire experts to help you. You're probably going to want them to get to work together as a team. In that case, you might even be ghostwriting your book, hiring a professional writer to write the book with your guidance and their guidance as well. Um, that's actually a time-honored way of doing it, particularly if you're not like a writer yourself, right? But you've got all kinds of ideas or autobiography ideas and stuff like that. You want a book out there, but you're not a writer type. You can hire someone to ghostwrite, and then you can hire to work with them. They can work with a development editor, all stuff like that. So, the kind of, you can, if you can kind of see a kind of, I don't know, kind of inverted pyramid from, kind of like just you, and then all the way up to kind of having a whole production team. The development editor would definitely be, if you want a whole production team, you're definitely going to want a development editor helping you with things, picking your audience, picking your title, picking your book structure, even picking what your book might be about, is something that you want to do. The one I would venture to say, like, given my personality, the one big drawback to a development editor is, like, I just don't believe that a development editor would have a lot to help me with. I'm probably the kind of person who, like, wouldn't go to a psychiatrist because I think I'm smarter than them and understand their own business better than they do. I say that with the kind of like self-aware kind of humility that's probably not true, but that's the way I feel about it. So working with a development editor is not something that I would typically do. I just wouldn't want to offload any important decision, or even I wouldn't. I mean, I'd talk with friends that I respect or something like that before I'd hire a stranger to do that. Uh, if you want to get a development editor, the last thing I guess I would say about that is, like, find someone that really can show you that they've got a lot of experience. Unless they're kind of brand new and they're like, hey, look, I want to devote 100% of my effort to you because you're my first, author that I'm working with. That can be an interesting thing to do too. But find someone with, typically what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find someone who's serious, who you get along with, who has, proven experience, and with whom you've had a little bit of like one or two meetings in advance to make sure you're on the same page about what you want to do. So that's some of my thoughts about whether or not you should hire an editor as a self-published author. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining the live stream today.